Hi everyone, in this video I want to show you various techniques for kick and bass sidechaining. So I've set up a kick and a bass line here, and these kick and basses were made by me for a sample pack that's getting released by Universal Tribe, which is an Australian label that I've released a couple of tunes on. So the link will be in the video description for where you can pick up that sample pack. It's got a bunch of samples by myself and then a heap of the other producers that are on the label. So my kick and bass sounds like this. Cool, so it's I'm sort of going towards a more dark prog sort of sound here, and yeah, I wanted to show you different ways where I can make that bass line really roll nicely with the kick drum. And there's a few common ways that that's done. So the first way would be to use a compressor. So in this case, I've got the Ableton's built-in compressor, and I've got that turned on. And what you can do is you can press this little yellow arrow, and it opens up the sidechain part, and you switch on that yellow button there. And then you say the audio coming from the kick drum is going to get fed into this compressor. And every time that kick drum plays, it's going to trigger this compressor to work on the bass. And what that is doing is I've got it compressing a ratio of infinity to 1. Play around with that, but I just typically say, yeah, go all the way. Attack, I go as quick as possible because I want it to jump on the sound. I don't want some of the sound to come through. I just want an instant attack. My release is on 50 milliseconds. Play around with that to get an interesting sound for what you like. And then I've started pulling the threshold down so that it starts biting. So let's do that whole process just so you can follow through. So compressor, grab that, chuck it on the channel, open up the triangle, sidechain, input, kick drum, ratio, and attack. So let's pull the attack down first, and then we'll bring the threshold down. So let's play the sound, and let's start pulling this down. Cool. So if we turn the ratio up, so sorry, 1 to 1's not going to do anything. 2 to 1, it's doing a fair bit. Cool, so you can notice how much it's pushing that sound down. And then we can set it at an infinity. Cool, I kind of like it around there. And then with the release, this is how long the compression is going to be pushing the bass down. So if we play around with this, if we make it quicker, you'll notice we're getting some crackling and stuff. It's just because all of this is like responding very quickly. And so you'll notice if we get too extreme with the release, you get some ripping in the sound. Cool, so the release is, if you make it really long, it's really pushing the volume down of the bass for a very long time. Cool, and now they're working together much nicer and it's creating a very interesting rhythm. Cool, so that's the first way of using that compressor. And what we're doing is we're taking the kick that is actually the kick that we're hearing, and that is what's triggering the compressor. Another way to do that would be to set up a separate channel like I have here, Sidechain audio, and then I've taken the kick drum and I've put the kick on there, and that is something that we could use instead to trigger. So we could, instead of taking the kick, we could take the sidechain. And the reason being is because maybe we don't always, like maybe we need the sidechain to be triggered, but maybe the kick drum's not playing in the track. So we just make a muted version of the kick drum, and that way we can just keep it playing and we can have it rolled out all the way through our project. And it doesn't it doesn't matter whether it's still there, because what we can do is we can not only have the bass sidechain to that, we could also have pads, and the pads, maybe we always want the pads to be sidechained even when there's no kick drum playing. So that's why you would use a external trigger for the sidechain. And there was something else that I wanted to talk about quickly with that. So you can do that, and then you can also use the EQ inside of here, and let's have a listen to that. So if we just listen to what's coming through from the sidechain, you can hear the kick inside of that compressor that's on the bass, right? So if I turn the headphones off, it plays me the kick. If I hear the if I turn that off, I hear the bass. So that lets me hear what's coming in from the sidechain. And then what I can do is I can decide that I'm going to cut certain parts of it. Cool, so that's the full sound. So I'm just kind of getting the click. So the low end of that kick isn't necessarily coming into the sidechain, so it's just a click that's triggering it, and that can be a bit more clinical in some cases, which could be a cool effect that you're looking for. If you look at it here. So if I turn the EQ off, notice how it's different, whereas that was just a sharp thing, sharp kind of stab in and then release, like that. And when you turn the EQ off, it kind of does a bit of a different rhythm. Cool, and you'll figure out which one works well for you. So that's the Ableton compressor, okay? And that's the same as using any other sort of compressor. You just need to set up the sidechain input. Next, we can have a look at another way of doing it. So we've got LFO tool here. And LFO tool, it can affect a bunch of different things. So in this case, we've got it set to affecting the volume. So what this is doing is essentially a quarter note cycle here that we can see. So the rate set down here as this period of time is 1 quarter note. And if I press spacebar and start it playing with it turned on, you can see the bass notes are laid on this overlay here. So you can actually see what's going on. And what's happening is the bass starts at 0 volume, and it moves all the way up to maximum volume by the time that second bass note's hit. So we're looking at this period of time inside of here. So this first bass note is getting the volume reduced by quite a bit. You can see this sort of brighter color is the actual volume, and the duller color is what it would have been if the volume envelope wasn't affecting it. So we've got the volume slope coming up, and then it rapidly cuts back down again. And if you keep that all the way at the end, sometimes you get some clicks and pops from the volume going like straight to 0. So I give it a little bit of room so it can naturally kind of fall back down to 0 and then start the cycle again. So let's watch it. Let's watch it play through, and then we'll play around with the positioning. So let's have a listen. So I'll turn that LFO tool off. Cool, and then turn it back on. Sweet, so you notice that pumping. So then and you can get all sorts of different characters out of how it's going to sound. Cool. So you can play around with that and get something that you like. So currently LFO tool is an LFO, and it's constantly running at a quarter note. So whenever you press the play button, it's constantly cycling. But what you can actually do is you can set it up to accept an external trigger as well, just like the sidechain that we did with the compressor. So I've made this MIDI channel here, and I've set it up to send the MIDI information from this channel to the bass channel, and then it automatically has figured out that both LFO tool, and I've also got Shaper Box on there as well, one or the other of those can accept a MIDI input. So I've set it up so the MIDI is going to get sent from this channel every time it triggers here, and it's going to come into the bass channel, and it's going to come into LFO tool, and it's going to tell LFO tool to re-trigger. So if I click on MIDI and then I click it twice, it turns it into an envelope. So what's going to happen is that whenever this MIDI note is sent, it's going to trigger LFO tool to run an envelope for a quarter note length, and it's going to run one cycle of that. Cool. So if I take all of these other notes away, and I make sure that those other plugins are turned off. Yep, cool. So you'll hear the LFO tool, and you'll see it work for the first cycle, and then it won't work for any of these other ones. So let's press play. Cool, and it actually doesn't play. It doesn't play the volume of. It actually doesn't play the bass at all, and I think that's because it's resting on 0 decibels. When it gets all the way to the bottom, like you see, it's saying that it's completely closed. Cool, so it needs that coming in, otherwise it's not going to play any volume. So if I place it all like that, cool, and now I've got that MIDI externally triggering the LFO tool. So that could be cool for you guys to play around with that as well. It's just another way of doing it. So I'm going to turn the LFO tool off, and I'm going to turn the compressor back on because I like the groove we were getting. Cool. And then finally, this isn't necessarily sidechaining, but it could help with some creative ideas. So what this is Shape a Box. It's essentially doing a very similar thing to what LFO tool's doing. So you set up the length. So in this case, I've set it up for 1 bar, and then this yellow line is dictating the volume. And I just pulled this in here just to give you an example. So maybe you've got a section where you've just got complete duggers, just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you want to transition to a different rhythm. You can use this to make the rhythm. Cool, so it's only playing the bass. You can see when it's full volume, you can see that bass note. You can see a little bit of this one. So it's just basically chopping up that 1 bar, and it's only letting certain parts of the bass come through. So you could have that as a different section of your track, and then you could transition out of it. So I'm just modulating the mix there, but you can come through here and you can play with all sorts of like prearranged patterns that they've already got. So if I put the mix on, that one's not a very good example, but I think you can, yeah, we can move it along like that. That one's a bit boring. Some of these will work, otherwise you just make your own ones. But that's just a little pro tip for something you can mess around with as well. So I'll turn that off, and then finally, so we've got the compressor, we've got the LFO tool, and then the final way that I would probably sidechain things is if I turn that compressor off, what you can do is this. You can grab that, you can grab that, and we could, first of all, come into this guy, and we could say, all right, you're going to be -6 decibels. So we could try that and see how it sounds. Okay, cool, it's all right, but then what we might do next is we might grab all of them and freeze them. But maybe I'll grab it from the beginning and freeze them all together like that. And then maybe I could grab the volume fade and I could pull it. So there's another way that you can sidechain. Cool. And also with the compressor, sometimes the compressor can be a bit of a pain. So let's turn it on because you can't freeze channels that have got compressed like sidechain compression. So what we could do is we could go new audio channel, bass with sidechain. We'll take that from the bass channel and we'll record it in. Cool, and I'll pause that, come back. And maybe I'll just take one instance of that just to know that it's going to be exactly the same. Then we can turn that off. We can put the bass in there. And then we've saved that sidechain compression because we've recorded out the volume automation that it puts on the sound. Cool. So there's some creative ways of, or different ways of how you could sidechain and play around with getting rhythms on your bass line. So hopefully that was interesting to you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. Hi everyone. Thank you for watching my videos. If you would like some one-on-one help, I offer one-on-one tutorials over Skype. So if you think that you need a little bit of extra help, please get in touch with me. You can email me. My email will be in the link of the video description. If you would like to support the channel in other ways, jump over onto Patreon and consider becoming a patron. Subscribe to me on YouTube and like my page on Facebook. And thanks again for watching my video. See you in the next one.